was a rumble in the jungle. Once I heard Dad was outside again counting birds, and Mama plugged in a nightlight, and I saw the queen of the world.
Welcome to the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. I am your co-host Liz, and we have Natalie here. So today's episode is part 2 of Alissa's story, which we heard last week. And in part 1, she told us all about her journey with IVF and how her and her husband had a 1.5% to 2% chance to conceive naturally. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go give it a listen before this one. It'll, kind of give you more insight into what Alissa has gone through. And in this episode, Alissa tells us about her birth with Reed, who was a surprise pregnancy when she was just 5 months postpartum from her first. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll just jump right in. Enjoy.
So I kind of had a feeling with Reed. So his due date was March 11th and my birthday is March 7th. And so the whole time of my pregnancy, everyone's like, oh, like, what if he comes on your birthday? And I'm like, no, I just want him to like have a day of his own. And of course, midnight, it was like 12:03. I woke up on my birthday to contractions. I'm like, okay. And John had just taken NyQuil because he had like a head cold. And so I'm like, hey, I'm in labor. And he's like, no, you're not. Go back to bed. And I'm like, number one, you have to be nice to me because it's my birthday. And number two, I'm in labor. Wake up. So it was crazy that both of my stubborn-headed boys at 39 weeks exactly decided that that's when they wanted to make their entrance, despite my best planning. Yeah. So
Did you plan for like a repeat C-section?
So because Emmett was breech and because I had the blood clot, and those were the two main reasons for my C-section, my doctor was like, you're a phenomenal candidate for a VBAC if you want to try. And similar to kind of my birth plan with Emmett, it was however he gets here healthy, great. So I was like, absolutely, yes, I'll try for a VBAC. If it doesn't work, I'm okay with doing a C-section. My one kind of stipulation was I don't want to get to like 9 centimeters and then wind up with a C-section. I'm not trying to recover from 2 births and one. And so I said, if I go into labor on my own and things progress fine, then yes, I'll attempt the VBAC, but I don't want to do like an induction to VBAC. I feel like that is when things probably I would wind up with a C-section anyway. So I said, if I go into labor on my own, then that's like his way of telling me, okay, this is how I'm coming into the world. And so I did go into labor on my own, and I got to the hospital. My water hadn't broken yet or anything, but I was only 1.5 centimeters. I wasn't even a 2. And my contractions were really strong and I was in a lot of pain. And so I remember my nurse being like, well, like, you seem like you're in a lot of pain. Like, we're not going to send you home. And we don't necessarily want to give you, like, inducing drugs yet. But what do you feel about, like, an epidural? And I'm like, yes, give me the epidural. I'm good. And so as soon as I got the epidural and my body kind of relaxed because I wasn't in so much pain, I started dilating quickly. And so we got to... When I woke up in labor at midnight, I remember like, John, I don't want to call our moms yet because it's midnight. Like, I don't want to wake them up in the middle of the night. So I'm going to like try to go to bed. Like, my water hasn't broken. I'm just having contractions. So like, I'm going to shower and then come and like lay back down. And then it was around 3 a.m. and my contractions were like 5 minutes apart. And I'm like, like, I don't know if we should go yet. I'm okay. And then Emmett, who was like 15 months at the time, woke up at like 3:15 screaming bloody murder. And I like go in to get him, and he had 102 fever. That was like the highest fever he had ever had, the sickest he had been. Turns out he had an ear infection that he had been on antibiotics for, and the antibiotics didn't fully take care of it, even though we thought it did. And so he's super sick. So I call my mom at like 3:30, and all you hear is Emmett screaming in the background. I'm crying. She was like, what's going on? I'm like, Emmett's really sick and I'm in labor. And she's like, I'll be right there. And so I called my mom, John called Rhonda, and they were at our house before 4 a.m. Like, they were there super quick. And I just remember like sitting on the ottoman, like in our living room, having contractions, holding Emmett while he's sobbing with like this high fever. I'm sobbing, and they're like, Alissa, like, give us Emmett. And I'm like, no, but like, he's my first baby and he's this sick and I can't leave him. This is like the first time he's been that sick. And they're like, you need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, I can wait a little longer. My mom like takes Emmett from me. So finally we went to the hospital. Turns out John told me like months later he does not remember the drive to the hospital. I think because of the NyQuil. That's not good. Okay. So we got to the hospital a little after like 4 a.m. and I finally got my epidural, I think around like 6 or 7 in the morning, and got like some sleep and then started dilating. And they did wind up giving me a little bit of Pitocin just because I was dilating like fairly slowly. But once I got the little bit of Pitocin and like the epidural was in me, I dilated to, I was at a 10 by, I think it was like 5:26 is when I was a 10, and then started pushing. And he was born at 6 o'clock on the dot. And so it was just the most peaceful. Yeah. Like I got my epidural and we had the Pitocin, and I just kind of had the peanut ball in between my legs, and our nurse was awesome. Her name's Madison. She's actually getting ready to have her own baby because I added her on Facebook, but she was the sweetest soul. She made me a happy birthday banner since it was my birthday, and they like hung it above my bed, and they brought me in like a cupcake, and all the nurses sang happy birthday to me. And she was just like, this is like, she kept calling it like a double birthday celebration. And like, she was just so positive, and I feel like that's everything that I like needed in that moment. And then John was there, and he was just like super supportive, and he was just so excited to be able to be at a birth of one of his children that he was just like, so the whole atmosphere was just like positivity and excitement. And the fact that it was just like he and I think is exactly what we needed to bring like Reed into the world. And so yeah, I pushed for about 45 minutes, and then he was born, and he was beautiful and great. And John still says it was the most amazing thing he's ever witnessed. And I'm like, oh, so like, thanks. And so we were also very fortunate. We had a birth photographer who reached out. It was in one of like a Facebook group that I was in. I think she had reached out that she was, she normally did home births and a few deliveries at the birthing center at Mercy, but that she was expanding into more of the like medically supported births on the different floors, and that she was in exchange for someone allowing them into their birth was going to give them like the free birth session. Wow. And which, yeah, those are normally very expensive. Yeah. And I remember like telling John like, hey, I like have been talking with this lady, and I would really like to do it. And he's like, sure, you want to like document that? I'm like, I don't know if you like get the full extent, but yes. And he's like, okay, I mean, if that's what you want to do. And looking back, those are some of my like favorite photos, just the like documentation that she got of John and I even before he was born, and just like the look on John's face when he saw Reed for the first time. And when I got to see Reed, it's like, just being able to have those are some of my favorite. And it really like truly encompasses just how peaceful and cathartic the entire, like one of the like pictures she got, since it was evening, like the sun was shining through like the window, and she had like the outline of like John like holding my hand and like bent over like comforting me. And I'm just like, that's like what the entire vibe of Reed's birth was, that it was just like peaceful and so healing from what we like, the aloneness, if that's even a word, like isolating of what I like felt like cold, stark OR for Emmett's birth versus like peaceful light through the window and like my support partner there, and just like everything that I needed to kind of heal from the trauma that was Emmett's birth. So yeah, it was awesome. And my doctor came in on a day, I think it was a Sunday, and they like called her from like her weekend off. And I was okay with, I had met other doctors from the practice, and so Dr. Todd Glass like was the one who broke my water and was like talking me through some things. And he's like, I just updated like Dr. Stein, and she said she's gonna be here soon because of your last birth with Emmett, and she doesn't want you to like. She's coming, and I'm like, thanks. I don't know if I could do another one of these without her, because like she was the only one who got me through the C-section, and so just the fact that she came was like just awesome.
Yeah. That's so sweet.
Yes.
I have a question. So she was your OB like growing up, like before you decided to do IVF. So then did she referred you to an endocrinologist?
Mhm.
And then did you like graduate from
Yeah. So when you go through IVF, they treat you or your providers through typically like 8 to 9 weeks. And so at the beginning of IVF, you go and you get like your beta blood draws, and they make sure that like your HCG is doubling how it should be. And then around 6 weeks, they do an ultrasound there just to make sure that everything implanted like where it should, and that typically you don't see baby just yet or heartbeat just yet. Like you can sometimes, but they typically look just to make sure there's like the gestational sac and like a fetal pool and things are developing how they should. And then around like 7.5 to 8 weeks, you typically have like your graduating ultrasound where they go and they like you hear heartbeat and you make sure everything's good. If you have any complications before that, you could have more. So like I had spotting early on with Emmett, so I had another ultrasound just so they like would check and make sure everything's okay. And then if all of your levels look good, your last ultrasound looks good, then that's when you graduate to like your regular OB. So the fertility clinic, they just see you through like they're basically there to get you pregnant, and then they support you at the very beginning of pregnancy, but then you go on to your OB or
Midwife.
Yep. I could not think of the word. I'm like, it's not a doula. Doula's for labor. But yeah, midwife. So whoever your normal provider would be, that you kind of transition back to them. Because a lot of people won't see you before.
Yeah.
But I think it's like 8 or 9 weeks even. Like that's when your normal doctor's appointment would be scheduled. And so we were fortunate, like through IVF, that we got to see Emmett even when he was like a tiny little gummy bear before he was. And so yeah, it was very different between Reed's first ultrasound to Emmett's, because Emmett was just like the tiny little speck. I mean, we even have an ultrasound from Emmett's during transfer where like you see the little flash of light of like that was them transferring the embryo into your uterus. And so like we have that we have a video of it too.
Wow.
But then Reed's, I was like in denial that we could even get pregnant on our own. So I was farther along and I'm like, wow, he looks pretty big on that screen. Like, it's not what I remember a first ultrasound looking like from Emmett. And so it was quite the difference. Yeah. So some people will go back, which we didn't get the chance to do this because of COVID, but they'll bring like the babies back to the fertility clinic to like meet the doctors that like help to make them. And so we haven't had the chance to that, because they do it on like certain days. So obviously you're not there when the people that are obviously actively going through infertility, because that would be yes, like it's very disheartening. And so I definitely need to like check back in and go see Dr. Julie Ree at Vios. They are awesome. If anyone needs a reproductive endocrinologist, they are great. So
Vios is not Kind Body.
Oh, is it?
I found that out.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
And it like headquartered in New York.
wow.
Some research.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because we still have our embryos like frozen through them, but I haven't like checked back in or anything. So
I like nanny for a mom that work.
yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I know they just built like a brand new building in Chesterfield or Creve Coeur, one of the two, that it's like a hub for. Because when we did our transfer and everything, we went to, it was like Collinsville. So they had Collinsville and they had an office in like one of the Mercy Towers, but they just built like a brand new, like huge building. So hopefully appointments and services would be more like easily accessible for people.
How was postpartum with Reed?
I think it was easier, I don't think there was any less anxiety or less hormones, but I think I knew what to expect more. I knew like hey, like 4 to 5 days, there's a big drop. Like 4 to 5 days postpartum is when, like, even though if you think you're feeling great, like it's gonna be okay. It was more of the transition from 1 to 2 that like gave me anxiety. It was like, I know what to do with a newborn, but I don't know how to juggle 2 of them. And so I think it was more of a shift in priority type of thing where I had to tell myself, okay, if they're both crying, you have to assess the level of need and like whose need is gonna get, like Emmett's crying over a broken toy, but Reed's crying because he's hungry. I'm gonna have to feed Reed and talk Emmett through the broken toy. Like not that I couldn't necessarily pick him up at that time. So it was a little bit of navigating that, but I think parenthood of 2, like the rest of your life is going to be that. Like I'm constantly having to assess like damage level of situations throughout the day. Like Emmett's about to pee on the floor, but Reed's about to dump over the dog's water bowl. Like I'd rather clean up the water than the pee. So I'm going to grab Emmett and get him to the toilet. Like it's just constantly assessing which direction I'm going to be pulled. But I think just knowing, like, once again, with Reed, I wasn't breastfeeding, so that level of anxiety wasn't there. I was able to be on my normal anxiety medicine again. That was easier. Obviously, there are so many different hormones to deal with, but it wasn't nearly as like daunting as the first time, just because I think I knew what to expect. And I feel like my recovery wasn't nearly as bad. I mean, VBAC recovery versus C-section recovery are 2 vastly different things in themselves, but I also didn't have the blood clot on top of it. So I felt like I could do more for myself post VBAC than what I could do C-section. Whereas like C-section, I felt like I was still needing to be taken care of. And while I was still recovering from a vaginal birth, I mean, I had a 3rd-degree tear, I still had stitches. I didn't feel as like bed bound or like restricted with my mobility as I did after my C-section and blood clot, because I couldn't walk on my Frankenstein leg and my abdominal muscles had been cut. Versus post VBAC, I was able to kind of get up and do more, and I was able to like still play with Emmett and still like bend down to actually pick my baby up out of the bassinet, whereas like post C-section I wasn't able to do that with Emmett. And so I think that aspect of it was less anxiety inducing. I mean, there was still anxiety, and I never so much had postpartum depression as I did, like my anxiety would get so bad and then I would get sad that I was so anxious, and then that's where my depression piece would come in. And so I think just being able to recognize like, hey, like it's okay if things don't go according to plan. It's okay if things aren't fully on a schedule right away. And that really helped. We also still sent Emmett to his in-home daycare while I was on my maternity leave with Reed. And so I think that helped a lot, that he and I still got that chance to bond. And that time was kind of like catch up time for me almost, where it's like, okay, I'm 1-on-1 again with a baby versus like the 2-on-1. And I think that's where that piece can get overwhelming. And so I really think that was beneficial, number 1, for Emmett's routine not to be disrupted, and number 2, for Reed and I to get that chance to still bond and figure ourselves out, because he's a whole nother baby too. So, but I always say Reed was born a teenager. Like he will sleep until 10 a.m. He just like eats everything, and he's like, literally to this day I will have to go in there at 10 a.m. and get him up. I'm like, dude, you're supposed to be napping in an hour and a half. Like we gotta. So he's been not that Emmett was a difficult baby by any means, but Reed has definitely been more of just kind of like a go with the flow second childhood. I feel like he kind of had to be, but he's kind of just seamlessly fit into our lives, and I think that made that piece a little easier. So
yeah. And he's a Pisces.
Yes, he is. We're all water signs in my house. John's a Cancer, Reed and I are Pisces, and Emmett's a Scorpio. So it's like, I'm just waiting for I've seen some of his emotional side come out, though, because Pisces are just super emotional beings. So when John found out that Reed was going to be a Pisces, he's like, I'm not sure I can handle two of you and your emotions. And I'm like, hey, buddy, hey, I'm surprised I haven't cried yet throughout this whole thing, to be honest. Like, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, but not everybody gets to see them. So I'm an emotional person, but also I can keep it in, which I think Reed will be similar, because I've kind of seen some of his, like, he can turn it on and turn it off, very much so. But as the boys are both getting older, it's been like the 15-month age gap obviously wasn't anything that we had planned, but now seeing them together and their personalities, I couldn't imagine it like any other way. That we are extremely blessed with both of them.
That's so awesome.
Yes,
I love it.
it's everything that I wanted when John and I had talked about sibling relationships. I get to see from them. I mean, granted, they don't love each other all the time. Half the time, Emmett's like body slamming Reed onto the floor, and the word mine is said more times than I can count, but they love each other. So that's good. Yeah. The other morning, Emmett was up first, like he always is, because he wakes up at the crack of dawn, even though Reed sleeps until 10. And so I'm like, do you want to go get Reed up? And he's like, yeah. And he runs in, and we have this little like rocking dog next to Reed's crib, and he climbs up on it so he can see into Reed's crib, and he says, good morning, Reed Michael. And I'm like, oh, okay. And Reed like smiles up at him, and it was just the perfect like core memory moment. Hey, I'm gonna remember this while you two have each other in a headlock later.
Yeah. Up like a cloud.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So my pregnancies and birth experiences were as different as my boys' personalities with each one, but it's kind of cool to have the different perspective of, okay, I know what the C-section and traumatic birth was like, and I know what the VBAC was like, and I know what IVF was like, but I also know what a surprise pregnancy is like. It's like there's so many like different like aspects that you wouldn't think would be all wrapped into one, but they are.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite the experience.
Yeah. Dynamic.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer this because the state of the world. What are you gonna do with all your frozen embryos?
So as of right now, none of the new laws or anything impact them staying frozen. Thus far, that I know of. I mean, obviously that could all change. So John and I have talked, and our plan has always been to donate to another couple. We feel that we have 8 embryos, and that we're very fortunate to have that amount. And as they are frozen, they will always be a 24-year-old's healthy, like good graded embryos. And so we feel that those are someone's babies, whether or not they're biologically that person's or not. And so we've talked about that. We would love to donate, and we always said, fortunately, none of our siblings have had infertility issues similar to what we did. But we always said, if our siblings or any like close friends, we would obviously love to donate to them. But I know that for some people that could be hard. And so we've also talked about donating to a couple, but we haven't talked about the timing of that per se. So, I mean, they can stay frozen for as long as, should no laws impact that, they can stay frozen for as long as we pay the storage fees. So they could be donated to a couple at any point. And so that is the plan. We're just not exactly sure when, because we do feel that our family is complete. I think we're done with 2, just because the chaos that is 2 under 2, but also to what we were talking about a little bit off air, just daycare costs are insane. And so I think we could provide more and have more experiences for a family of 2 versus if we were to have a third or even a fourth, that I think it would just be limited on some of that. Unless we win the lottery, and then I will absolutely have all 8 of our embryos. Like I'm okay with that. But yeah, we've talked about donating, and so it's a whole process. So it's actually called embryo adoption. So you go through that whole process. And so I know that fertility clinics have like people and like families that they can match you with, but I've also seen on some of the like infertility IVF community on Instagram that I've been a part of, people have connected on there and have just like one person that I'm thinking of in particular, her name's Kelsey. They adopted their embryos, and the biological family of the embryos had reached out to her on Instagram and was like, I saw your story and I just felt absolutely called that, like, I feel like these embryos belong to you. I'm not sure if you would be interested in embryo adoption. And like, that's how they receive their embryos. So I'm like, I just feel like there's a plan, and these embryos are somebody's children. It's just when that should be. Yeah. So
Never heard of that before.
Really?
No, I've heard of like donating eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But never, yeah.
Yeah. So if there is ever a couple that their piece of infertility, should it be like AMH, like they don't have eggs, or if on the male factor infertility, if they don't have sperm or something like that, that they're able to carry the baby. So you adopt the embryo and then you still go through the IVF transfer and you're able to carry the baby. It's just
That's so cool.
it's someone else's embryo.
Yeah.
It's
I follow 2 women on Instagram who have adopted.
yes.
So like one of the girls has, like, they ended up doing IVF, this couple. So a girl adopted 2 of their embryos, had twins, had a miscarriage, and then is now pregnant with their triplets.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, oh, like,
Yeah.
it's all brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Like, it's so cool.
Yeah, so you can, like, we could say we would like all 8 embryos to go to like one family so that like the siblings would be together, or you could say like we're comfortable donating 4 of them to one family and 4 of them to another family, or things like that, so people can kind of decide however many like they would like to go. But if those embryos could give someone else a chance at having a family, then I would absolutely, because I mean, we were, like I said, fortunate that we got that number of embryos, and we were fortunate that our first transfer worked, and then even more fortunate that we were able to have our 2% chance natural pregnancy occur. So if we could help play a factor into someone else's percentage of success, I would absolutely like love for that. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool.
So a lot of in-depth
Very cool.
conversations that John and I had, because when you start IVF, you have to like decide when you have those embryos what you're going to do. And so your options are to discard, donate to science, or donate to a couple. And we kind of went back and forth, and I was like, well, I'm not discarding them. So my 2 options are donate to science so they could better the processes, or donate to a couple. And John kind of opened my eyes a little bit to where he was like, well, yes, the donate to science piece, but I feel like we would just be using that to make ourselves feel better, that like almost you're still discarding them in a sense. Like, while it is bettering processes, like he's like, I still would feel like there's no life coming from that. And he's like, I feel like we put so much love and time and work into creating these embryos that I feel like they do deserve a chance at life. And so then that's really what kind of led us to the donating to a couple. So yeah,
That's really special.
yes, we are. Yes, we are very fortunate to have that number of embryos, and I do think we will probably wait until all of our like close friends and family feel like their families are complete, because secondary infertility is a very real thing. So while all of them have been blessed to have first children, like you never know what's going to happen down the road. So we would just love to have that option if it could be less of a a journey for anybody that we love. So, yep.
So cool.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm excited to see that play out.
Yes.
Because it could be like, 10, 15 years on the line.
Mm-hmm.
They've been frozen for that long.
Yes, it's crazy. It's like some people even write it in like their wills that like it gets donated upon death. But I'm like, part of me is like, that's kind of crazy that like, should that child ever want to like know biologically later down the road? And it's like, oh no, they died like before you were ever born. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of odd. But it's just science is so crazy.
Yes.
Part of me always wonders though if they'll look like Emmett, because I don't think Emmett and Reed look alike.
No.
But technically all of the embryos are Emmett's fraternal twin. Like, because they were all from the same batch. So I'm like, would they look similar versus Reed? Like, I see similarities between Emmett and Reed, but I don't think they look like super close, like alike versus if we were to ever have a third or upon the donation and live births of the embryos, would they look like Emmett? I'm not sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Let's do some science.
Right.
That's crazy. You just like have an embryo.
Right? Like
open embryo.
So they do.
Yeah.
So you can have open embryo adoption or closed embryo adoption, similar to like a regular adoption. Yeah, which is crazy within itself. But embryo adoption is much more financially reasonable than regular adoption from what I've heard and read, because I like transfer fees just to do a transfer is like $4,000 to $5,000 on its own, and then I don't think the legal fees are as crazy as like normal adoption fees. But it's insane.
Oh God.
Yes,
I can't. I know. I would like love to be a surrogate, but it's like all these legal fees I've like looked into, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like paperwork and different things involved with it, and it's a whole process. Yeah. So
It's a lot of it. After you had Reed, did you go on birth control?
No, so I actually can't because of my blood clot. And so, I could have an IUD, but I had an IUD in college, and my body did not agree with it. It gave me ovarian cysts that started rupturing. I was crazier on my IUD hormonal wise than I was when I was pregnant. Like I told John, like after I got my IUD out, I was like, I'm sorry. Like now that I have clarity, like I was crying every day. It did not agree with me. And so I could do progesterone only. But there's just also a part of me that I feel like I've finally gotten my body rid of all those hormones, that I'm not going to incorporate them back in. So I'm very diligent about tracking and using other means of preventing, because it was a very odd feeling for me getting like a surprise positive pregnancy test. And you would think after so long of infertility and so many negatives that like I would have been immediately happy. And like, sorry, Reed, if you ever hear this as you're older, like my first thought was, holy shit, like, what am I going to do? And I like walked out of the bathroom with the test and I was like, holy shit. And sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on here. Yeah. Okay. And I was like, John, he's like, what? He's like, oh my God. And I was like, what are we going to do? And he's, I don't know. And I was like crying, because part of me, I mean, Emmett was still a baby. I felt like I wasn't gonna have as much one-on-one time with him, so part of me felt guilty from that. And then eventually the like shock of it all wore off, and I was like, okay, no, like this is a blessing. We're not supposed to be able to like have this on our own. And that all turned to joy. And obviously I could not imagine our lives without him, and he's the light of our life. But it was quite the shock at first, that it was just whoa. So we are very diligent in not having that occur, which John has said he would get a vasectomy, that he is not opposed to that. He would like to do it in March so that he could watch basketball. And so I'm like, okay.
What is that?
March Madness during his healing process. And I'm like, Okay, I barely got pain pills in like a day to recover from my C-section. So like after that, you're gonna get some peas and like a few basketball games, but then we're gonna be up like and doing things. So yes. So I feel like even if he does get the vasectomy, our door is not always closed because we do have the embryos. But at this time in our lives, our family is complete. We sold our baby stuff. We had a garage sale. It was like, okay, I'm good. Everyone's always like, don't you want a girl? And I'm like, no, I'm good with my 2 boys. We're rocking. I'm like, we're complete.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I just want to try the science part of it. Like if they look like Emmett.
Yeah,
I think they look so different.
They do. They look, and part of me's like, does it have something to do with like how they could sort through John's sample? Like, is Emmett the superior genes and Reed's just like the dominant? Like, is he like what would have happened in nature? I'm like, I have no clue. And so it's interesting to see because like Emmett has super curly hair. He has like the type of hair that I had as a child, and then Reed's is like stick straight, and John's type of hair, and they don't look similar at all. And had I not known that Emmett was deaf, like I watched the little canister that like said my name on it, like, is he our embryo? Like, is he somebody else's? I don't know. So I mean, you see those stories from different like fertility clinics, and that thought is like terrifying, but they triple checked before our transfer that he was ours. Yeah. When Emmett was born, my doctor was like, oh, he's kind of a redhead. And my first thought was, oh my God, they gave us the wrong embryo. Like we would not have a redhead. And he was not a redhead. He was a brunette, but like, so that would be interesting to see. I don't know. Maybe I'll buy another Mega Millions, and then we'll have our one of our other 8 embryos. Right? Oh God.
Oh my God.
No, a singleton pregnancy is enough for me.
Yeah, as you can just tell.
Yes. Oh,
well, thank you so much for coming on. I know I was excited to hear about all that, and it was
thank you.
lived up to it.
Yeah. Hopefully, I encompassed. I'm sure there are parts that I skipped over or missed out on or forgot, but it was a whirlwind to go through, and so I'm glad that you guys were along for the ride of recounting it. So thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I'm an open book about all things infertility, fertility, birth, postpartum, just emotions and hormones in general. So if anybody ever wants to talk or chat about that, I'm an open book. And if anyone is going through infertility or needs a support system that you don't necessarily have in your life, I would love to be that person for you. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah. How can people find you?
Instagram. Yes. So Alissa.Schwartz. Yes. Alissa Schwartz on Instagram. God, is that bad that I don't know my own Instagram handle? Let's see.
I don't know my personal one.
Alissa D. Schwartz. Yep. So you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook. And I follow the Golden Hour podcast on all forms of social media. So if you can't find me by looking up the name that I clearly don't remember, if you look through their followers, I will be there.
And Alissa with an I.
Yes. Oh, it is. And you had another Alissa with an I on, and I thought that was so cool. I don't see people with my spelling a lot. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll link your Instagram in our show notes also.
Oh, perfect.
And then I'm sure we'll announce it before this, but we have a new Facebook group that you're also in, and it's the Golden Hour Birth Circle, where we're gonna, chat and share birth stories and stuff. So that'll be fun.
And I'm so happy Alyssa's in it because she has just like secrets up her sleeve. Every single time I need something, she is someone I reach out to. The daycare. What else have I reached out to you for?
We talked about, so my brain is like a random filing system of things, but I'm also, I think it's the like psycho planner part of me that like there's one thing that happens in my life and I obsessively like Google and research it to no end. And then I just store that information. Yep. So should you need advice on anything aside from infertility and motherhood, my brain might have the knowledge. So feel free. I'm always looking for more friends. I do too. I'm just, if I can help anybody in any way, it's just brings me joy. So,
Well, you've helped me, so there's some joy for you.
oh goodness.
All right. Well,
Yeah, we'll link our social medias in the show notes and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. And I think that's it.
and we'll see you next episode.
Bye.
Bye. That was awesome.